Hey, welcome back. We're going to try to finish The Outsiders in the next couple days. So, tonight, chapter 8 and chapter 9. Okay? Chapter 8 and chapter 9. So, I'm starting on page 119. 119. We just left Ponyboy, who had a meeting with Randy in Randy's car, and he sort of saw Socs as people, just like he is. Just the big difference between them is the advantages that they have, the money that they have, and the breaks that they often get. Chapter 8. The nurses wouldn't let us see Johnny. He was in critical condition. No visitors. But Two-Bit wouldn't take a no for an answer. That was his buddy in there, and he aimed to see him. We both begged and pleaded, but we were getting nowhere until the doctor found out what was going on. "Let him go in," he said to the nurse. "He's been asking for them. It can't hurt now." Two-Bit didn't notice the expression in his voice. It's true, I thought numbly. He's dying. We went in practically on tiptoe because the quietness of the hospital scared us. Johnny was lying still, with his eyes closed. But when Two-Bit said, "Hey, Johnny Kid," he opened them and looked at us, trying to grin. "Hey, y'all." The nurse, who was pulling the shades open, smiled and said, "Oh, so he can talk after all." Two-Bit looked around. "They treating you okay, kid?" Don't, don't, don't let me put enough grease on my hair." "Don't talk," Two-Bit said, pulling up a chair. "Just listen. We'll bring you some hair grease next time. We're having the big rumble tonight." Johnny's huge black eyes widened a little, but he didn't say anything. "It's too bad you and Dally can't be in it. It's the first big rumble we've had, not counting the time we whipped Shepard's outfit." "He came by." "Tim Shepard?" "Came to see Dally." Tim and Dallas had always been buddies. "Did you know you got your name in the paper for being a hero?" Johnny almost grinned as he nodded. "Tough enough," he managed, and by the way his eyes were glowing, I figured Southern gentlemen had nothing on Johnny Cade. I could see that even a few words were tiring him out. He was pale as the pillow and looked awful. Two-Bit pretended not to notice. "You want anything besides hair grease, kid?" Johnny barely nodded. "The book." He looked at me. "Can you get another one?" Two-Bit looked at me, too. I hadn't told him about Gone with the Wind. "He wants a copy of Gone with the Wind so I can read it to him. You want to run down to the drugstore and get one?" "All right," Two-Bit said cheerfully. "Don't y'all run off." I sat down in Two-Bit's chair and tried to think of something to say. "Dally's gonna be okay," I said finally. "And Derry and me, we're okay now." I knew Johnny understood what I meant. We had always been close buddies, and those lonely days in the church strengthened our friendship. He tried to smile again, and then he suddenly went white and closed his eyes tight. "Johnny, are you okay?" He nodded, keeping his eyes closed. "Yeah, it just hurts sometimes. It usually don't. I can't feel anything below the middle of my back." He lay breathing heavy for a minute. "I'm pretty bad off, ain't I, Pony?" "You'll be okay. You gotta be. We couldn't get along without you." The truth of that last statement hit me. We couldn't get along without him. We needed Johnny as much as he needed the gang, and for the same reason. "I won't be able to walk again," Johnny started. "Not even on crutches. Busted my back." "You'll be okay," I repeated firmly. "Don't start crying," I commanded myself. "Don't start crying. You'll scare Johnny." "You want to know something, Pony Boy? I'm scared stiff. I used to talk about killing myself." He drew a quivering breath. I don't want to die now. It ain't long enough. 16 years ain't long enough. I wouldn't mind it so much if there wasn't so much stuff I ain't done yet, and so many things I ain't seen. It's not fair. You know what? That time we were in Windricksville, it was the only time I've been away from our neighborhood. You ain't gonna die, I said, trying to hold my voice down. And don't get juiced up, 'cause the doc won't let us see you no more if you do. 16 years on the streets, and you can learn a lot, but all the wrong things, not the things you want to learn. 16 years on the street, and you see a lot, but all the wrong sights, not the sights you want to see. Johnny closed his eyes, rested quietly for a minute. Years of living on the east side teaches you how to shut off your emotions. If you didn't, you would explode. You learn to cool it. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Johnny, she said quietly, your mother's here to see you. Johnny opened his eyes. At first they were wide with surprise, and then they darkened. I don't want to see her, he said firmly. She's your mother. I said I don't want to see her. His voice was rising. She'll probably come to tell me about the trouble I'm causing her and how glad her and the old man will be when I'm dead. Well, tell her to leave me alone. For once. For once, just tell her to leave me alone. He was struggling to sit up, but he suddenly went whiter than the pillowcase and passed out cold. The nurse hurried me out the door. I was afraid of something like this if he saw anyone. I ran into Two-Bit, who was coming in. You can't see him now, the nurse said, so Two-Bit handed her the book. Make sure he can see it when he comes around. She took it, closed the door behind her. Two-Bit stood and looked at the door a long time. I wish it was any one of us except Johnny, he said, and his voice was serious for once. We could get along without anyone but Johnny. Turning abruptly, I said, Let's go see Dallas. As we walked out into the hall, we saw Johnny's mother. I knew her. She was a little woman with straight black hair and big black eyes like Johnny's. But that was as far as the resemblance went. Johnny Cake's eyes were fearful and sensible. Hers were cheap and hard. As we passed her, she was saying, But I have a right to see him. He's my son. After all the trouble his father and I have gone through to raise him, this is our reward? He'd rather see those no-count hoodlums than his own folks. She saw us and she gave us a look of hatred that I almost backed up. It was your fault. Always running around in the middle of the night getting jailed and heaven knows what else. I thought she was going to cuss us out. I really did. Two-Bit's eyes got narrow, and I was afraid he was going to start something. I don't like to hear women get sworn at, even if they deserve it. No wonder he hates your guts, Two-Bit snapped. He was going to tell her off real good, but I shoved him along. I felt sick. No wonder Johnny didn't want to see her. No wonder he stayed overnight at Two-Bit's or our house, slept in the vacant lot in good weather. I remembered my mother, beautiful and golden like soda, wise and firm like dairy. Oh, Lordy! There was a catch in Two-Bit's voice. He was closer to tears than I had ever seen him. He has to live with that. We hurried to the elevator to get to the next floor. I hoped the nurse would have enough sense not to let Johnny's mother in. It would kill him. Dally was arguing with one of the nurses when we came in. He grinned at us. Man, am I glad to see you. These hospital people won't let me smoke, and I want out. We sat down grinning at each other. Dally was his usual mean, ornery self. He was okay. Shepard came by to see me a while ago. That's what Johnny said. What did he want? Said he saw my picture in the paper and couldn't believe it didn't have wanted, dead or alive, under it. He mostly came in to rub in about the rumble. Man, I hate not being in on that. Only last week, Shepard had cracked 3 of Dally's ribs. But Dally and Tim Shepard always had been buddies, no matter how they fought. They were 2 of a kind, and they knew it. Dally was grinning at me. Kid, you scared the devil out of me the other day. I thought I had killed you." "Me? Why?" "When you jumped out of that church, I meant to hit you just hard enough to knock you down and put out the fire, but when you dropped like a ton of lead, I thought I aimed too high and broke your neck." He thought for a minute. "Glad I didn't, though." "I'll bet," I said with a grin. I never liked Dally, but then for the first time I felt like he was my buddy, and all because he was glad he hadn't killed me. Dally looked out the window. How's the kid?" "We just left him," Two-Bit said, and I could tell he was debating whether to tell Dally the truth or not. "I don't know about stuff like this, but, well, he seemed pretty bad to me. He passed out cold before we left him." Dally's jawline went white as he swore between clenched teeth. "Two-Bit, you still got that fancy black-handled switch?" "Yeah." "Give it here." Two-Bit reached into his back pocket for his prized possession. It was a jet-handled switchblade, 10 inches long. It would flash open at a mere breath. It was the reward of 2 hours of walking aimlessly around a hardware store to divert suspicion. He kept it razor sharp. As far as I knew, he had never pulled it on anyone. He used his plain old pocket knife when he needed a blade. But it was his showpiece, his pride and joy. Every time he ran into a new hood, he pulled it out and showed off with it. Dally knew how much that knife meant to Two-Bit, and if he needed a blade bad enough to ask for it, well, he needed a blade. That was all there was to it. Two-Bit handed it over to Dally without a moment's hesitation. "We gotta win that fight tonight," Dally said. His voice was hard. "We gotta get even with the Socs. For Johnny." He put the switch under his pillow and he lay back, staring at the ceiling. We left. We knew better than to talk to Dally when his eyes were blazing and he was mood like that. We decided to catch a bus home. I just didn't feel much like walking or trying to hitch a ride. Two-Bit left me sitting on the bench at the bus stop when he went to a gas station to buy some cigarettes. I was kind of sick to my stomach and sort of groggy. I was nearly asleep when I felt someone's hand on my forehead. I almost jumped out of my skin. Two-Bit was looking down at me worriedly. "You feel okay? You're awful hot." "I'm all right," I said, and when he looked at me as if I didn't believe him, I got a little panicky. "Don't tell Derry, okay? Come on, Two-Bit. Be a buddy. I'll be well by tonight. I'll take a bunch of aspirins." "All right, but Derry'll kill me if you get real sick and go ahead and fight anyway." "I'm okay," getting a little angry, "and if you keep your mouth shut, Derry won't know a thing." "You know something?" Two-Bit said as we were riding home on the bus. "You'd think you could get away with murder living with your big brother and all, but Derry's stricter with you than your folks were, ain't he?" "Yeah, but they'd raised 2 boys before me. Derry hasn't. You know the only thing that keeps Derry from being a Soc is us." "I know." I had known it for a long time. Spite of not having any money, the only reason Derry couldn't be a Soc was us. The gang. Me and Soda. Derry was too smart to be a greaser. I don't know how I knew, I just did. And I was kind of sorry. I was silent most of the way home. I was thinking about the rumble. I had a sick feeling in my stomach, and it wasn't from being ill. It was the same kind of hopelessness that I had felt that night Derry yelled at me for going to sleep in the lot. I had that same deathly fear that something was going to happen that none of us could stop. As we got off the bus, I finally said, "Tonight, I don't like it one bit." Two-Bit pretended not to understand. "I never knew you to play chicken in a rumble before, not even when you was a little kid." I knew he was trying to make me mad, but I took the bait anyway. "I ain't chicken, Two-Bit Matthews, and you know it. Ain't I a Curtis, same as Soda and Derry?" Two-Bit couldn't deny this, so I went on. "I mean, I got an awful feeling something's gonna happen." "Something is gonna happen. We're gonna stomp the Socia's guts, that's what." Two-Bit knew what I meant, but doggedly pretended not to. He seemed to feel that if you said something was all right, it immediately was, no matter what. He had been that way all his life, and I don't expect he'll change. Soda Pop would have understood, and we would have had to try to figure it out together, but Two-Bit just ain't soda. Not by a long shot. Cherry Valance was sitting in her Corvette by the vacant lot when we came by. Her long hair was pinned up, and in daylight she was even better looking. That Stingray was one tough car. Bright red one. It was cool. "Hi, Pony Boy," she said. "Hi, Two-Bit." Two-Bit stopped. Apparently Cherry had shown up there before during the week Johnny and I had spent in Windrixville. "What's up with the big times?" She tightened the strings on her ski jacket. "They play your way. No weapons. Fair deal. Your rules." "You sure?" "Randy told me. He knows for sure." Two-Bit turned and started home. "Thanks, Cherry." "Pony Boy, stay a minute," Cherry said. I stopped and went back to her car. "Randy's not going to show up at the Rumble." "Yeah, I know." "He's not scared. He's just sick of fighting. Bob," she swallowed and went on, "Bob was his best buddy since grade school." I thought of Soda and Steve. What if one of them saw the other killed? Would that make him stop fighting? Nah, maybe it would make Soda stop, but not Steve. He'd go on hating and fighting. Maybe that was what Bob would have done if it had been Randy instead of him. "How's Johnny?" "Not so good. Will you go up to see him?" "No, I couldn't." "Why not?" I demanded. It was the least she could do. It was her boyfriend who had caused it all. And then I stopped. Her boyfriend. "I couldn't," she said in a quiet, desperate voice. "He killed Bob. Oh, maybe Bob asked for it. I know he did, but I could never look at the person who killed him. You only knew his bad side. He could be sweet sometimes and friendly, but when he got drunk, that was part of him that beat up Johnny. I knew it was Bob when you told me the story. He was so proud of his rings. Why do people sell liquor to boys? Why? I know there's a law against it, but kids get it anyway. I can't go see Johnny. I know I'm too young to be in love and all that, but Bob was something special. He just wasn't any boy. He had something that made people follow him, something that marked him different, maybe a little better than the crowd. Do you know what I mean?" I did. Cherry saw the same thing in Dallas. That was why she was afraid to see him, afraid of loving him. I knew what she meant all right, but she also meant she wouldn't go see Johnny because he had killed Bob. "That's okay," I said sharply. It wasn't Johnny's fault Bob was a booze hound and Cherry went for boys who were bound for trouble. "I wouldn't want you to see him. You're a traitor to your own kind and not loyal to us. Do you think your spying for us makes up for the fact that you're sitting there in a Corvette while my brother drops out of school to get a job? Don't you ever feel sorry for us? Don't you ever try to give us handouts and then feel high and mighty about it?" I started to turn and walk off, but something in Cherry's voice made me stop. I was ashamed. I can't stand to see girls cry. She wasn't crying, but she was close to it. "I wasn't trying to give you charity, Pony Boy. I only wanted to help. I liked you from the start, the way you talked. You're a nice kid, Pony Boy. Do you realize how scarce nice kids are nowadays? Wouldn't you try to help me if you could?" I would. I'd help her and Randy both if I could. "Hey," I said suddenly, "can you see the sunset real good from the west side?" She blinked. "Real good." "You can see it real good from the east side, too." "Thanks, Pony Boy." She smiled through her tears. "You dig okay." She had green eyes. I went on, walking home slowly. Chapter 9. It was almost 6:30 when I got home. The Rumble was set for 7, so I was late for supper, as usual. I always come in late. I forget what time it is. Derry had cooked dinner, baked chicken and potatoes and corn. 2 chickens, because all 3 of us eat like horses. Especially Derry. But although I love baked chicken, I could hardly swallow any. I swallowed 5 aspirin, though, when Derry and Soda weren't looking. I do that all the time because I can't sleep very well at night. Derry thinks I just take one, but I usually take 4. I figured 5 would keep me going through the rumble and maybe get rid of my headache. Then I hurried to take a shower and change clothes. Me and Soda and Derry always get spruced up before a rumble. And besides, we wanted to show those Socias we weren't trash. We were as good as they were. Soda, I called from the bathroom. When did you start shaving? When I was 15, he yelled back. When did Derry? When he was 13. Why, you figure on growing a beard for the rumble? You're funny. We ought to send you into the Reader's Digest. I hear they pay a lot for funny things. Soda laughed and went right on playing poker with Steve in the living room. Derry had on a tight black t-shirt that showed every muscle on his chest and even the flat, hard muscles of his stomach. I'd hate to be the Soch who takes a crack at him, I thought as I pulled on a clean t-shirt and a fresh pair of jeans. I wished my t-shirt was tighter. I have a pretty good build for my size, but I'd lost a lot of weight in Windrexville and it just didn't fit right. It was a chilly night and t-shirts aren't the warmest clothes in the world, but nobody ever gets cold in a rumble. And besides, jackets interfere with your swinging ability. Soda and Steve and I had put more hair oil on than was necessary, but we wanted to show that we were greasers. Tonight we could be proud of it. Greasers may not have much, but they do have a rep. That and long hair. What kind of world is it where I have to be proud of is a reputation for being a hood and greasy hair? I don't want to be a hood. But even if I don't steal things and mug people and get boozed up, I'm marked lousy. Why should I be proud of it? Why should I even pretend to be proud of it? Derry never went in for the long hair. He was short and clean all the time. I sat in the armchair in the living room waiting for the rest of the outfit to show up. But of course, tonight the only one coming would be Two-Bit. Johnny and Dallas wouldn't show. Soda and Steve were playing cards and arguing as usual. Soda was keeping up a steady stream of wisecracks and clowning, and Steve had turned up the radio so loud that it almost broke my eardrums. Of course, everybody listens to it loud like that, but it was just not the best thing for a headache. You like fights, don't you, Soda? I asked suddenly. Yeah, sure. I like fights. How come? I don't know. It's action. It's a contest, like a drag race or a dance or something. Shoot, said Steve. I want to beat those Socias' heads in. When I get in a fight, I want to stomp the other guy good. I like it too. How come you like fights, Derry? I asked, looking up at him the way he stood behind me, leaning in the kitchen doorway. He gave me one of those looks that hide what he's thinking. But Soda piped up. He likes to show off his muscles. I'm going to show 'em off to you, little buddy, if you get any mouthier. I digested what Soda had said. It was the truth. Derry liked anything that took strength, like weightlifting or playing football or roofing houses, even if he was proud of being smart, too. Derry never said anything about it, but I knew he liked fights. I felt out of things. I'll fight anyone anytime, but I don't like to. I don't know if you ought to be in this rumble, Pony, Derry said slowly. Oh, no. Thought in mortal fear. I've got to be in it. Right then, the most important thing in my life was helping us with the Socias. Don't let him make me stay home now. I've got to be in it. How come? I've always come through before, ain't I? Yeah, you fight real good for a kid your size. But you were in shape before. You've lost weight. You don't look so great, kid. You're tensed up too much. Shoot, said Soda, trying to get the ace out of his shoe, without Steve noticing him. We all get tensed up before a rumble. Let 'em fight tonight. Skin never hurt anybody. No weapons, no danger. I'll be okay. I'll get a hold of a little one, okay? Well, Johnny won't be there this time. Johnny and I sometimes gang up on one big guy. But then Curly Shepherd won't be there either, or Dally, and we'll need every man we can get. What happened to Shepherd? I asked, remembering Tim Shepherd's kid brother, Curly, who was tough, cool, hard as nails Tim in miniature. I had once played chicken by holding our cigarette ends to each other's fingers. We had stood there, clenching our teeth and grimacing with sweat pouring down our faces, and the smell of burning flesh made us sick, each refusing to holler, until Tim happened to stroll by. When he saw that we were really burning holes in each other, he cracked our heads together, swearing to kill us both if we ever pulled a stunt like that again. I still have the scar on my forefinger. Curly was an average downtown hood, tough and not real bright, but I liked him. He could take anything. He's in the cooler, Steve said, kicking the ace out of Soda's shoe. In the reformatory. Again? I thought. Let me fight, Derry. If it was blades or chains or something, it'd be different. Nobody ever really gets hurt in a skin rumble. Well, I guess you can, but be careful, and if you get in a jam, holler and I'll get you out. I'll be okay. How come you never worry about Soda Pop as much? I don't see you lecturing him. Man, Derry grinned and put his arm around Soda's shoulders. This is one kid brother I don't have to worry about. Soda punched him in the ribs, affectionately. This kiddo can use his head. Soda Pop looked down at me with mock superiority, but Derry went on. You can see he uses it for one thing, to grow hair on. He ducked Soda's swing and took off for the door. Two-Bit stuck his head in the door just as Derry went flying out of it. Leaping as he went off the steps, Derry turned a somersault in mid-air, hit the ground, and bounced up before Soda could catch him. Whoop! Two-Bit said cheerfully, cocking an eyebrow. I see we are in prime condition for a rumble. Is everybody happy? Yeah! Screamed Soda, as he too did a flying somersault off the steps. He flipped up to walk on his hands and then did a no-hand cartwheel across the yard to beat Derry's performance. The excitement was catching. Screeching like an Indian, Steve went running across the lawn in flying leaps, stopped suddenly, and flipped backward. We could all do acrobatics because Derry had taken a course at the Y and then spent the whole summer teaching us everything he learned on the grounds that it might come in handy in a fight. And it did, but it also got Two-Bit and Soda jailed once. They were doing mid-air flips down a downtown sidewalk, walking on their hands and otherwise disturbing the public and the police. Leave it to those two to pull something like that. With a happy whoop, I did a no-hands cartwheel off the porch steps, hit the ground, and rolled to my feet. Two-Bit followed me in a similar manner. I am a greaser, Soda Pop chanted. I am a J.D. and a hood. I blacken the name of our fair city. I beat up people. I rob gas stations. I am a menace to society. Man, do I have fun. Greaser, 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 Steve sing-songed. Oh, victim of environment, underprivileged, rotten, no-count hood. Juvenile delinquent, you're no good, Derry shouted. Get thee hence, white trash, Two-Bit said in a snobbish voice. I am a Soc. I am the privileged and the well-dressed. I throw beer blasts. I drive fancy cars, break windows at fancy parties. And what do you do for fun? I inquired in a serious, awed voice. I jump greasers, Two-Bit screamed and did a cartwheel. We settled down as we walked to the lot. Two-Bit was the only one wearing a jacket. He had a couple of cans of beer stuffed in it. He always gets high before a rumble. Before anything else, too, come to think of it. I shook my head. I'd hate to see the day when I have to get my nerve from a can. I'd tried drinking once before. Stuff tasted awful. I got sick, had a headache, and when Derry found out, he grounded me for 2 weeks. But that was the last time I'd ever drank. I'd seen too much of what drinking did to you at Johnny's house. Hey, Two-Bit, I said, deciding to complete my survey. How come you like to fight? He looked at me as if I was off my nut. Shoot! Everybody fights. If everybody jumped in the Arkansas River, old Two-Bit would be right on their heels. I had it then. Soda fought for fun, Steve for hatred. Derry for pride, and Two-Bit for conformity. Why did I fight? I thought, and I couldn't think of any good reason. There isn't any good reason for fighting except self-defense. Listen, Soda, you and Ponyboy, Derry said as we strode down the street. If the fuzz show, you two beat it out of there. The rest of us can only get jailed. You two can get sent to a boys' home. Nobody in this neighborhood's gonna call it fuzz, Steve said grimly. They'd know what would happen if they did. All the same, you two blow at first sign of trouble. You hear me? You sure don't need an amplifier, Soda said, and stuck out his tongue at the back of Derry's head. I stifled a giggle. If you want to see something funny, it's a tough hood sticking his tongue out at his big brother. Tim Shepard and company were already waiting when we arrived at the vacant lot, along with a gang from Brumley, one of the suburbs. Tim was a lean, cat-like 18-year-old who looked like a model JD we see in the movies and magazines. He had bright curly black hair, smoldering dark eyes, and a long scar from the temple to the chin where a tramp had belted him with a broken pop bottle. He had a tough, hard look to him, and his nose had been broken twice. Like Dally's, his smile was grim and bitter. He was one of those who enjoyed being a hood. The rest of his bunch were the same way. The boys from Brumley, too. Young hoods who would grow up to be old hoods. I never thought about it before, but they'd just get worse as they got older, not better. I looked at Derry. He wasn't going to be any hood when he got old. He was going to get somewhere. Living the way we do would only make him more determined to get somewhere. That's why he's better than the rest of us. He's going to go somewhere, and I was going to be like him. I wasn't going to live in a lousy neighborhood all my life. Tim had the tense, hungry look of an alley cat. That's what he always reminded me of, an alley cat, and he was constantly restless. His boys ranged from 15 to 19, hard-looking characters who were used to the strict discipline that Tim gave out. That was the difference between his gang and ours. They had a leader, and they were organized. We were just buddies who stuck together, each man his own leader. Maybe that's why we could whip 'em. Tim and the leader of the Brumley outfit moved forward to shake hands with each one of us, proving that our gangs were on the same side in this fight, although most of the guys in these two outfits weren't exactly what I'd like to call my friends. When Tim got to me, he studied me, maybe remembering how his kid brother and I had played chicken. You and that quiet black-haired kid were the ones who killed that Soch? Yeah, I said, pretending to be proud of it. Then I thought of Cherry and Randy and got this sick feeling in my stomach. Good going, kid. Curly always said you were a good kid. Curly's in the reformatory for the next 6 months. Tim grinned ruefully, probably thinking about his roughneck, hard-headed brother. He got caught breaking into a liquor store, the little... He went in to call Curly every unprintable name under the sun, in Tim's way of thinking, terms of affection. I surveyed the scene with pride. I was the youngest one there. Even Curly, if he had been there, had turned 15, so he was older than me. I could tell Derry realized this too, and although he was proud, I also knew he was worried. Shoot, I thought, I'll fight so good this time he won't ever have to worry about me again. I'll show him that someone besides Soda Pop can use his head. One of the Brumley boys waved me over. We mostly stuck with our own outfits, so I was pretty leery of going over to him, but I shrugged. He asked to borrow a weed, and then he lit up. That big guy with y'all. You know him pretty well? I ought to. He's my brother, I said. I couldn't honestly say yes, I knew Derry as well as he knew me. That isn't saying a whole lot. No kidding. I got a feeling he's going to be asked to start the fireworks around here. He's a pretty good bopper? He meant rumbler. Those Brumley boys have weird vocabularies. I doubt if half of them can read a newspaper or spell much more than their names. When it comes to their speech, I mean, you take a guy that calls a rumble bop action, and you can tell he isn't real educated. Yep, but why him? Why anybody else? I looked our outfits over. Most greasers don't have real tough builds or anything. They're mostly lean and kind of panther looking in a slouchy way. This is partly because they don't eat much and partly because they're slouchy. Derry looked like he could whip anyone there. I think most of the guys were nervous because the no weapons rule. I didn't know about the Brumley boys, but I knew Shepard's gangs were used to fighting with anything they could get their hands on: bicycle chains, blades, pop bottles, pieces of pipe, pool sticks, sometimes even heaters. I mean, guns. I kind of have a lousy vocabulary too, even if I am educated. Our gang never went in for weapons. We're just not that rough. The only weapons we ever used were knives, and shoot, we carried them mostly just for looks. Like Two Bit with his black handled switch. None of us had ever really hurt anybody, or wanted to. Just Johnny, and he hadn't wanted to. "Hey, Curtis!" Tim yelled. I jumped. "Which one?" I heard Soda yell back. "The big one! Come on over here!" The guy from Brumley looked at me. "What'd I tell you?" I watched Derry move forward toward Tim and the leader of the Brumley boys. He shouldn't be here, I thought suddenly. I shouldn't be here. Steve shouldn't be here. Soda shouldn't be here. And Two Bit shouldn't be here. We're greasers, not hoods. We don't belong with this bunch of future convicts. We could end up like them, I thought. We could. And the thought didn't help my headache. I went back to stand with Soda and Steve and Two Bit then, because the Socs were arriving right on time. They came in 4 carloads and they filed out silently. I counted 22 of them. There were 20 of us, so I figured the odds were as even as we could get 'em. Derry always liked to take on 2 at a time anyway. They looked like they were all cut from the same piece of cloth, clean shaven, semi-beetle haircuts, wearing striped or checkered shirts with light red or tan colored jackets or Madras ski jackets. They could easily have been going to the movies as to a rumble. That's why people don't ever think to blame the Socs, and they're always ready to jump on us. We look hoodie and they look decent. It could just be the other way around. Half of the hoods I know are from pretty decent guys underneath all that grease. From what I've heard, a lot of the Socs are just cold-blooded mean, but people usually go by looks. They lined up silently facing us, and we lined up facing them. I looked for Randy, but I didn't see him. I hoped he wasn't there. A guy with a Madras shirt stepped up. "Let's get the rules straight. Nothing but our fists, and the first to run, lose. Right?" Tim flipped away his beer can. "You savvy real good." There was an uneasy silence. Who's going to start it? Derry solved the problem. He stepped forward under the circle of light made by the street lamp. For a minute, everything looked unreal, like a scene out of a J.D. movie or something. Then Derry said, "I'll take on anyone." He stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, his muscles taut under his T-shirt, his eyes glittering like ice. For a second it looked like there wasn't anyone brave enough to take him on. Then there was a slight stir in the faceless mob of Socs, and this husky blond guy stepped forward. He looked at Derry and said quietly, "Hello, Daryl." Something flickered behind Derry's eyes, and then they were ice again. "Hello, Paul." I heard Soda give kind of a, and I realized that blonde was Paul Holden. He had been the best halfback on Derry's football team at high school. He and Derry used to buddy it around all the time. He must be a junior in college by now, I thought. He was looking at Derry with an expression I couldn't quite place, but disliked. Contempt? Pity? Hate? All 3? Why? Because Derry was standing there representing all of us? And maybe Paul felt only contempt and pity and hate for greasers? Derry hadn't moved a muscle or changed expression, but you could see he hated Paul now. It wasn't only jealousy. Derry had a right to be jealous. He was ashamed to be on our side, ashamed to be seen with the Brumley boys, Shepard's gang, maybe even us. Nobody realized it but me and Soda. It didn't matter to anyone but me and Soda. That's stupid, I thought swiftly. They've both come here to fight, and they're both supposed to be smarter than that. What difference does the side make? Then Paul said, I'll take you. And something like a smile crossed Derry's face. I knew Derry had thought he could take Paul any time. But that was 2 or 3 years ago. What if Paul was better now? I swallowed. Neither one of my brothers had ever been beaten in a fight, but I wasn't exactly itching for someone to break the record. They moved in a circle under the light, counterclockwise, eyeing each other, sizing each other up, maybe remembering old faults, wondering if they were still there. The rest of us waited like mounting tension. I was reminded of that Jack London book, where the wolf pack waits in silence for one of the two members to go down in a fight. But it was different here. The moment either one swung a punch, the rumble would be on. The silence grew heavier. I could hear the harsh, heavy breathing of the boys around me. Still Derry and Soch walked slowly in a circle. Even I could feel their hatred. They used to be buddies, I thought. They used to be friends. And now they hate each other because one has to work for a living and the other comes from the West Side. They shouldn't hate each other. I don't hate the Socs anymore. They shouldn't hate. Hold up! A familiar voice yelled. Hold it! Derry turned to see who it was. Paul swung, a hard right to the jaw that would have felled anyone but Derry. The rumble was on. Dallas Winston ran to join us. I couldn't find a Soc my size, so I took the next best size and I jumped on him. Dallas was right beside me, already on top of someone. I thought you were in the hospital, I yelled at the Soc knocked me to the ground and I rolled to avoid getting kicked. I was. Dally was having a hard time because his left arm was still in bad shape. I ain't now. How? I managed to ask as the Soc I was fighting leaped on me and we rolled near Dally. Talk the nurse into it with two-bit switch. Don't you know a rumble ain't a rumble unless I'm in it? I couldn't answer because the Soc, who was heavier than I took him to be, had me pinned and was slugging the sense out of me. I thought dizzily that he was going to knock some of my teeth loose or break my nose or something, and I knew I didn't have a chance, but Derry was keeping an eye out for me, and he caught that guy by the shoulder and half lifted him up before knocking him 3 feet with a sledgehammer blow. I decided it would be fair for me to help Dally since he only could use one arm. They were slugging it out, but Dallas was getting the worst of it, so I jumped on the Soc's back, pulling his hair and pounding him. He reached back and caught me by the neck and threw me over his head to the ground. Tim Shepard, who was fighting two at once, accidentally stepped on me, knocking my breath. I was up as soon as I got my wind, and I jumped right back on the Soc, trying my best to strangle him. While he was prying my fingers loose, Dally knocked him backward, so that all 3 of us rolled on the ground, gasping, cussing, and punching. Somebody kicked me hard in the ribs, and I yelped in spite of myself. Some Soc had knocked out one of our bunch and was kicking me as hard as he could. But I had both arms wrapped around the other Soc's neck, and I refused to let go. Dally was slugging him, and I hung on desperately, although that other Soc was kicking me, and you'd better believe it hurt. Finally, he kicked me in the head so hard it stunned me, and I lay limp, trying to clear my mind and keep from blacking out. I could hear the racket, but only dimly, through the buzzing in my ears. Numerous bruises along my back and down my face were throbbing, but I felt detached from the pain, as if it wasn't really me feeling it. "They're running!" I heard a voice yell joyfully. "Look at the dirty! Run!" It seemed to me the voice belonged to Two-Bit, but I couldn't be sure. I tried to sit up, and I saw that the Socs were getting into their cars and leaving. Tim Shepard was swearing blue and green because his nose was broken again, and the leader of the Brumley boys was working over one of his own men because he had broken the rules and used a piece of pipe in the fighting. Steve lay doubled up and groaning about 10 feet from me. We found out later that he had 3 broken ribs. Soda Pop was beside him, talking in a low, steady voice. I did a double take when I saw Two-Bit, Blood was streaming down one side of his face, and one hand was busted wide open. But he was grinning happy, 'cause the Socs were running. "We won!" Derry announced in a tired voice. He was going to have a black eye, and there was a cut across his forehead. "We beat the Socs." Dally stood quietly beside me for a minute, trying to grasp the fact that we had really beaten the Socs. Then, grabbing my shirt, he hauled me to my feet. "Come on!" He half dragged me down the street. "We're going to go see Johnny." I tried to run, but I stumbled, and Dally impatiently shoved me along. "Hurry! He was getting worse when I left. He wants to see you." I don't know how Dallas could travel so fast and hard after being knocked around and having his sore arm hurt some more, but I tried to keep up with him. Track wasn't ever like the running I did that night. I was still dizzy and only had a dim realization of where I was going and why. Dally had Buck Merrill's T-Bird parked in front of our house, and we hopped into it. I sat tight as Dally roared down the car down the street. We were on 10th when a red siren came out behind us, and I saw the reflection of the red light flashing on the windshield. "Look sick," Dally commanded. "I'll say I'm taking you to the hospital, which will be truth enough." I leaned against the cold glass of the window, and I tried to look sick, which wasn't too hard, feeling the way I did right then. The policeman looked disgusted. "All right, buddy, what's the fire?" "The kid. He fell over his motorcycle, and I'm taking him to the hospital." I groaned. And it wasn't all fake out. I guess I looked pretty bad, too, being cut and bruised like I was. The fuzz changed his tone. "Is he real bad? Do you need an escort?" "How would I know if he's bad or not? I ain't no doc. Yeah, we could use an escort." And as the policeman got back into his car, I heard Dally hiss, "Sucker!" With the siren ahead of us, we made record time getting to the hospital. All the way there, Dally kept talking and talking about something, but I was too dizzy to make the most out of it. "It was crazy, you know that kid? Crazy for wanting Johnny to stay out of trouble, for not wanting him to get hard. If he had been like me, he'd never been in this mess. If he got smart like me, he'd never have to run into that church. That's what you get for helping people. Editorials in the paper and a lot of trouble. Better wise up, Pony. You better get tough like me and you don't get hurt. You look out for yourself and nothing can touch you." He said a lot more stuff, but I didn't get it all. I had a stupid feeling that Dally was out of his mind. The way he kept raving on and on, because Dallas never talked like that. And I think now I would have understood it if I hadn't been so sick at the time. The cop left us at the hospital as Dallas pretended to help me out of the car. The minute the cop was gone, Dally let go of me quick. I almost fell. "Hurry!" We ran through the lobby, crowded past people into the elevator. Several people yelled at us, I think 'cause we were pretty racked up looking. But Dally had nothing on his mind except Johnny, and I was too mixed up to know anything but that I had to follow Dally. When we finally got to Johnny's room, the doctor stopped us. "I'm sorry, boys, but he's dying." "We gotta see him," Dally said, and he flicked out Two-Bit's switchblade. His voice was shaking. "We're going to see him, and if you give me any static, you'll end up on your own operating table." The doctor didn't bat an eye. "You can see him, but it's not because you're his friends. But it's because you're his friends, not because of that knife." Dally looked at him for a second, and then he put the knife back in his pocket. We both went into Johnny's room, standing there for a second, getting our breath back in heavy gulps. It was awful quiet. It was scary quiet. I looked at Johnny. He was very still, and for a moment I thought in agony, he's dead already. We're too late. Dally swallowed, wiping the sweat off his upper lip. "Johnny Cake." "Johnny?" Johnny stirred weakly, then opened his eyes. "Hey, we won," Dally panted. "We beat the Socs. We stomped them, chased them out of our territory." Johnny didn't even try to grin at us. Useless. Fighting's no good. He was awful white. Dally licked his lips. They're still writing editorials about you in the paper, for being a hero and all. He was talking too fast and too calmly. Yeah, they're calling you a hero now and heroizing all the greasers. We're all proud of you, buddy. Johnny's eyes glowed. Dally was proud of him. That was all Johnny ever wanted. Pony boy. I barely heard him. I came closer and I leaned over to hear what he was going to say. Stay cold, Pony boy. Stay cold. The pillow seemed to sink a little, and Johnny died. You read about people looking peacefully asleep when they're dead, but they don't. Johnny just looked dead, like a candle with the flame gone. I tried to say something, but I couldn't make a sound. Dally swallowed and reached over to push Johnny's hair back. Never could keep that hair back. It's what you get for trying to help people. You little punk, that's what you get. Whirling suddenly, he slammed back against the wall. His face contracted in agony. Sweat streamed down his face. Damn it, Johnny, he begged, slamming one fist against the wall, hammering it to make it obey his will. Damn it, Johnny, don't die, please don't die. And he suddenly bolted through the door and down the hall.